Hi guys, this is PJ from Essential Guide Talk, and I am live today here at Bourbon, Scotch, and Beer in Lakewood, New Jersey, and we are here on a very special occasion. We have Simon Brooking, the brand ambassador for Lafroaig, and also Bowmore as well. You can see the bottle lineup right in front of me here. It's going to be a big day. We're going to try some very delicious, beautiful Scotch whiskey and learn a little bit about Lafroaig themselves. So without further ado, I'd like to bring Simon on to talk with us today. So come on. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
Good to be here.
So we're here at Bourbon, Scotch, and Beer today, who are very well known for their whiskey selection, bourbon and Scotch, and all of the deliciousness that I'm sure you've come to enjoy. But specifically with Lafroaig, can you tell me a little bit about the company and the history behind it?
Well, Lafroaig and Bowmore are part of the Bean Suntory group. I represent 5 distilleries from Scotland, Auchentoshan from the Lowlands, Glengarry and Ardmore from the Highlands, and from the island of Islay we've got Bowmore and Lafroaig. Also represent Teachers, Highland Cream, blended Scotch as well. Okay. So that's the Scotch portfolio.
So you've got a large portfolio of whiskeys.
A great portfolio, a real range from Lowlands to Highlands to Islay. And we also have what we consider the largest peated portfolio of whiskey in the world. Not only do we have Bowmore and Lafroaig, but Ardmore is a peated Highland whiskey. Right. And Glengarry, prior to 1997, Glengarry was a peated Highland whiskey as well. Oh, okay. We also have Connemara from Ireland, and we've got Hakkashu that's got some peated whiskeys.
So you do have quite the peated portfolio.
It's a great range, and peated whiskeys are very popular right now. Yes. So it just gives us a range of whiskeys to offer to people, because I think people think that the peated whiskeys are all one thing. Right. And it's all about the smoke, but there's a lot of variation. There's a lot of variety. Even from our distillery, let alone from region to region. And Bourbon, Scotch and Beer here have an amazing selection of whiskies to choose from Scotland.
So tell us a little bit about Bowmore specifically. We got Bowmore over here. So where's Bowmore located?
Well, Bowmore is located on what's called Loch Indal on the island of Islay. It is a protected harbour. So it made sense that the first town that was developed on the island of Islay was on the harbour, on the bay, Loch Indal. Bowmore is the name of the town as well, founded in the mid 1700s by the Campbell family, Daniel Campbell the younger, and because of its location, it was a perfect location to start a distillery as well. It has the distinction of having the oldest vaults in Scotland that date back to 1779. Wow. So for us, so much of Bowmore is about the history, but also it is also the balance of the Islay style whiskey. Lafroaig, on the other end of the island, is located very close what's called the Cadalton parish, the southern portion of the island, which bears all of the brunt of the storms of the seas coming across the Atlantic from Canada. I compare the west coast of Scotland to the Pacific Northwest of North America. If you think about the storms that hit up along the Oregon, Washington, British Columbia coast, same thing happens along the west coast of Scotland, and the landfall for many of those storms is the island of Islay, and particularly along the southern coast of the island, where you find Lafroaig, Lagavulin and Ardbeg. So climate dictates the style of the spirit in its tastes, in the way it is produced, in the way it is matured.
Very good. So where were you born?
I was born just outside Glasgow, East Kilbride. I'm definitely more west coast versus east, but I do represent a couple of the eastern distilleries as well, just outside Aberdeenshire. My family emigrated across the US, and I've been a brand ambassador for well over 20 years now, and have been with Lafroaig for over 12 years now, and Bowmore just more recently with the Suntory purchase,
Yes.
going on 4 years now.
Great, very good. Okay, so we are going to taste some of the Bowmore selections in front of us. And before we do that, I'd like to bring on the owner of Bourbon, Scotch, and Beer. So this is Van Prisco. He's going to be coming on now, and thank you very much for having us today.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Both of you. Cheers.
You came on at the right time, right? You're going to
Just
try
in time.
some of this deliciousness. So tell us a little bit about your location here.
Well, we've been here for 35 years, and about 10, 12 years ago, we started really seriously getting into whiskey, and I'm passionate about it myself. So it's a business,
You
but
can
it's
see that. You're
I
definitely
don't say
passionate.
it's a hobby, but it's something that I love doing.
Okay, great. So you want to try some with us today?
Absolutely.
Okay, Simon, so you tell us what we're going to try first, and
So,
what
yeah.
we should expect to experience with the taste.
I thought we'd start with the Bowmore, the Vault Edition. This is a first release. The Vault Edition speaks to the #1 vaults, which if you ever see those iconic photographs of the distilleries on the island of Isla, located right on the sea, there's a very important reason that they're located where they are, is because in the early 1800s, the waterways were the highways of the day.
Right.
So it was actually the fastest way to bring in the grain, as well as then to transport the whiskey off island. So the #1 vaults, which is located on Loch Indal, and Lafroaig has their #1 warehouse along the sea there, is a very unique location for aging whiskies. Because it is a much damper, cooler climate. If you think about the way whiskies are aged, matured in Kentucky, hot summers, cold winters, the barrels expand and contract at a much faster rate because of that differentiation of temperature. On the island in Scotland, much cooler climate, and on the cooler, damper climate of Isla, it allows us to age our whiskies in these warehouses by the sea for a much longer period of time.
Sure.
And that produces some really interesting flavors. And so that's what we've created with our Vault Edition Bowmores. There are 4 key flavors that are released in these #1 warehouses, which is below sea level, and so as a result, there's these flavors that develop in the casks that are unique to the location, the climate, the bioclimate, the microclimate of each of these
The
distilleries.
moisture in the air, the salt, and all of that.
Exactly, and so sea salt is the first edition. So if you want to grab a glass there in the front,
Sure.
and that one, perfect. So this is the first release, and there are 3 other releases that there's going to be a fruit one, there's going to be a smoky peaty release, and there'll also be a sweet release as well. But this is the first. Of course, it makes sense for us to start with the sea salt because that's such a contributing factor to the whiskeys. So, cheers, Flangevat.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Wow. Yeah, it does have a very unique flavor to it.
Bowmore, we like to talk about the balanced flavors. A little bit more. There's some citrus notes, but really for this one, that salt, that it starts with that sea salt.
You do.
Very
You get sea salt immediately.
chewy notes to it. Just a lovely addition to the range. A little bit more limited, but definitely well worth the addition of that singular flavor of the sea salt with this Vault Edition.
You get a strong smokiness in the smell, in the overall nose.
Well, and that's because we're using bourbon casks. You'll notice just in the color of the spirits themselves, bourbon casks for us will highlight more of the smoke. Although Bowmore, as you can see from the other bottlings that we have here, tends to use more sherry casks, and that's more of the classical style of the 19th century that they will be using. Lafroaig, on the other hand, tends to use more bourbon barrels because it highlights the smoke. So, to your point, this one, using the bourbon casks, you get the sea salt, but you also get a little bit more of the smoke than you normally get with the Bowmores.
I love the nose.
People use the term brininess. Do you consider that interchangeable, brininess versus sea salt?
I think the brininess is, for me, is a little bit more kind of in the nose, whereas sea salt for me is a little bit more of the taste.
Okay.
In the palate.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one. Outstanding. Okay, so moving on to our next bottle here. Tell us a little bit about it.
So this is the classic 18-year Bowmore. So this is part of our standard range. We also have a 12-year, 15-year. I should also point out the 15-year on the label it says darkest, but if you notice, these are the new packaging, the new labeling. The new 15-year, the darkest will have been removed from the packaging, but it still will be the exact same liquid. So keep that in mind.
So just a package difference,
yeah,
no variance.
It's
in
12
taste.
years bourbon and an additional 3 years in sherry. But the 18 years using a combination of bourbon and sherry casks, predominantly sherry casks. So again, this goes back to more of that classic style that you would have found in the 19th century.
Okay.
Bowmore, so it's going to use a marriage of 18. This was bottled at 43%.
Yeah, completely different on the nose.
There's a wee bit of the mustiness, which I think is a good thing, which more of the sherry casks will pull out. But here's the toast. I must go down to the sea today, to the lonely sea in the sky, and all I ask is an Isla cask and the friends to drink it dry.
Cheers.
Bowmore 18.
The finish is much more delicate on that one. I get fruity notes with it.
Classic, the dark fruit notes, the apricots, the more of a Christmas cake notes
That
on
comes
this
from
one.
the sherry, right?
Comes from the influence of the sherry casks. A little bit drier on the mouthfeel and on this one here. But 18 years is really for us kind of the beginning of, as these fruit notes evolve for us in the number one warehouse, they start taking on, these dark fruit notes start evolving into tropical fruit notes. We're not doing anything with the barrels. We're putting them there for what we call the long sleep, minimum of 3 years by law for us, for it to legally be called single malt. But 18 plus, 20 plus, you're going to see suddenly these fruit notes. You're getting pineapple and lychee nut, mango. Becomes even more prominent as you move into the 25 and plus year range, and that's just the location of it in the number one warehouse.
Wow. It's amazing the complete differences in characteristics just based on what you've described, just the location, the locale, the air quality, all of those things.
Well, we'll use the microclimates at the distilleries to either slow down a maturation or maybe give it a little bit of a lift. The warehouses that are away from the sea are relatively drier, a little bit warmer in comparison to the number one vaults. You walk in the number one vault, it's like walking into a mausoleum. Just time stops, and that's not a bad thing when it comes to whiskey.
Sure,
because
that's what you want.
it may be a very dense, quiet place, but there's a lot of things that are happening in the wood as it's maturing.
You can definitely tell the 18 year on that. It's a much smoother finish, very soft on the back end, and then as you move on, I'm sure the 30 year is going to be even more blended and delicate.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So what do we have next
Well,
here?
we're going to stay in the 18-year vein, but we're going to introduce a new series for Bowmore called the Vintners Trilogy. What the Vintners Trilogy is taking 3 different types of fortified wine type of casks, and we are going to, in the case of our 18 year here, it's 13 years in bourbon, and then an additional 5 years in a Manzanilla sherry cask. So if you want to grab your glass there,
Yes,
we'll have a nose of
absolutely.
that. So Manzanilla in the Sherry Triangle in Spain, in Jerez, you've got Jerez, which is down to the southwest, and then on the Guadalquivir River, that's where you're going to find the San Luca de Verameda, which is where the Manzanilla is produced. Manzanilla, it has its very cool nights, but a very humid climate, which sounds a lot like Isla, except it's a wee bit warmer there. So as a result, it really marries very interestingly with this whiskey from a very cool, damp climate, which is also humid as well. There's a lot of moisture in the air. So, as I said, 13 years bourbon, 5 in Manzanilla. And here's the toast. Salud, dinero, amor, y el tiempo para conquistarla todo.
We've got salud.
Salud.
In the nose, I got a little bit more of a nuttiness.
Yeah, that's the Manzanilla, like a white almond meat, nutty quality to it. Some black currant notes, and there's vanilla. There's just a hint of a Seville orange zest to this. Just to really, there's a lot going on with this, and this one's at 52.5 in terms of the strength, but you don't get a lot of heat from this. The Manzanilla really tames.
Really does.
Tames the heat of the spirit.
Very delicate on the back.
Very very dynamic. This is one of my new favorites. I love this Vintners Trilogy.
As you were describing the different flavors, I was getting them. So it is a pretty complex taste on the palate.
Yeah.
What is the anticipated release of the second and third?
The second has been released, and that's the 26 year, actually, which if I will... This is the 26.
Okay.
What the 26 year is 13 years bourbon, and then it's a 13 years in a Chateau Lagrange Bordeaux cask. So very different nose, very different taste experience, the Chateau Lagrange versus the Manzanilla cask. And the last of the trilogy is a 27-year port cask, which again, kind of a sugary Christmas cake notes on it. The sweetness coming from the port compared to the Bordeaux influence. 3 very different influences and 3 unique flavors, styles, profiles with the trilogies.
And that's 27 year, you said?
27 year port, 26 is here, 27 is coming in much more limited, but should be coming in probably by the end of the year.
Christmas gifts.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, great. So then the last of the 4 here, tell us a little bit about this one.
So,
this is 25 year?
Yep, this is our Bowmore 25 year. This is the small batch release, bottled at 43%. This is again a combination of bourbon and sherry, but primarily sherry. That's a high percentage of sherry cask. You can tell certainly by the color. And this one really starts, it captures that those tropical fruit notes here with this one. The tobacco notes, just a lot, all that time in the casks in the #1 warehouses really pulls a lot of fruit notes out in this one here. So if you want to grab that glass there.
Share this out with your favorite whiskey group, guys. We want everybody to take a look at what they're offering here, Bowmore and Lafroaig.
And the Bowmore on Loch in Dal, I should mention Loch in Dal. In Dal means in delay. That's the Gaelic for in delay. So that's why it was a harbour for the ships to anchor. Okay. When the storms are raging out in the open sea, they would come, they would anchor their ships and on Loch in Dal. So in many ways that in Dal, in delay, it kind of, that's what it's doing with the whiskey as well. It's kind of slowing things down,
Right.
and for a peaceful place, a safe harbor. So here's the toast. Here's taste, nae like us, God dent, and that translates to here's to us. There's nobody else like us. God damn the rest. Cheers.
Cheers.
And one of the things I would encourage your viewers, your listeners to do, when you're tasting these whiskeys, hold it in your mouth, give it a swirl, hold it, because then the saliva, similar to what you might do if you're adding water to your whiskey, you can do it naturally just with your saliva. So just give it a sip, hold it, swirl, and then release.
That'll get it to open up a little bit,
Yeah.
grab more of the flavor. Wow, yeah.
Bowmore means the big rock, the big reef. Total operational staff at Bowmore is 22 people.
Really?
This is a small operation. It is
Same family the entire time?
no,
Is it the Campbell family? or-
no. This was the Simpson family.
Oh, the Simpson
initially,
family, okay.
but it has passed on through the years. But now it is with Beam Suntory.
Gotcha.
But it was in its last iteration, it was the Morrison Bowmore family.
So, I mean, could you talk just briefly about the cold climate and how it affects the ABV in the barrel? You know,
Absolutely.
Are you finding
Well,
in
And
warmer
can you
weather
do me a
that-
favor?
that
Can you grab that
it
little
would
white box
traditionally
that's
be higher?
attached to
Yeah.
it and just detach it and give it to me?
If we use the comparison of Kentucky versus Scotland, in Kentucky, when the new spirit's coming off the still, the white dog, as it's going into the when it goes into the warehouses, in the higher racks of the warehouse, it's actually going to pull more water out of the barrels, and it's going to increase the alcohol strength. For us in Scotland, because that cool, damp climate, there's water almost immediately going into the casks when we put that new spirit in the barrels. So as a result, we're losing more water, more of the angel share at a much faster rate in terms of the alcohol. We have to be very careful. If we go down below 40% ABV, by law we cannot sell it as a single malt. Now what we might do is marry it with another cask to bring that strength up. So that is that water going into the barrels, then we have to be careful regarding the strength. It's going in at around 52%. It's coming off the still at 69 to 71, and then we're adding water and bringing it down to bottling to aging strength. But then we're monitoring it through the years, particularly as you get into these older years that we've got like these. Not only are you losing that 2% evaporation, but you're also losing a lot of alcohol, and after 30 years it starts tailing off much quicker. So we have to be very careful, and you'll notice as we go into our next tasting that the strength varies from year to year. So we might then take a barrel that's aging faster than we were anticipating up in the upper warehouses and move it down to the lower warehouses by the sea, because to slow down that maturation a little bit. Right.
So do you have anything that would be closer to cask strength?
These, as we move into the Lafroaig range, these are all at cask strength.
Okay.
So in various strengths, just again depending on where the casks are located.
Cool. Okay, very good. So that was Bowmore, and now we're going to move into Laphroaig now. And what is the first bottle that we have?
Yep. So Laphroaig means the hollow by the bay. It's interesting to note when you look at all the distilleries in Scotland, most of them are about geographical locations.
Sure.
Bowmore means the big rock, the big reef. Laphroaig means the hollow by the bay. You've also got Auchatosh means the corner of the field, because there was no GPS, no Waze back then.
Right.
So you needed to know where to find the boys where they were making their whiskey. So the name of the whiskey told you where to find the stills. And so the hollow by the bay, that iconic image of when you see Laphroaig there sitting on the bay, That was started by the Johnson brothers back in the late 18th century. They were farmers, as many farmers did. They had extra grain at the end of the season. It was more profitable, more economical for them to make a whiskey out of it, rather than lose it to the mold or the mildew of the cold damp winter months. So, and their whiskey became much sought after, particularly during the 19th century when whiskey was legalized, was because blended whiskey was the engine that drove the industry, but they can't make their whiskey without the single malt producers providing their liquid to make the whiskey with.
Sure.
And Lafroaig has a lot of great base notes when it comes to the kind of the flavors, and you don't need a lot of it, but you add that to your blend, and that just gives more depth to the whiskey, to the blended whiskey itself. So this is Laphroaig 25.
If you're just tuning in, guys, thank you for tuning into Essential Guide Talk. We are here with Simon Brooking. He's the brand ambassador for Bowmore and Laphroaig and many other peated whiskeys as well. And we're also here with the owner of Bourbon, Scotch, and Beer, Van. So we are trying the 25 year now from Laphroaig.
Yep, so we've just had the Bowmore 25. So the other side of the island, you're going to see, it's a nice comparison. Don't get to do this too often, but it's quite a treat to be able to do side-by-sides, different distilleries, same years. But as you can see, well, it's hard to see with the green glass, but certainly the color on this is quite a bit darker, quite a bit lighter. So this is a combination of bourbon and sherry casks. It is 25-year bourbon casks, married with 27 and 28-year sherry casks. Again, at Laphroaig, we like to use bourbon barrels. Our distillery manager, Ian Hunter, in the early 1900s, was traveling globally, came to the United States, traveled to Sweden. It's why it's two highest per capita consumption of Laphroaig in the world today are those two markets, because of Ian Hunter's efforts. But also, while Ian Hunter was in the United States, he discovered bourbon barrels for the first time. Bourbon barrels really didn't come into use in Scotland until post-Prohibition. But there were some of the distilleries were using them prior to that, and to my point earlier, Ian Hunter liked using bourbon barrels because it highlighted the smoke more so than the sherry casks. So this is a combination of the two, 60% bourbon and 40% sherry. So, Slàinte. Cheers.
Cheers.
For me, this really shows you the range of Laphroaig. For the folks who know perhaps the Laphroaig 10 or Laphroaig Quarter Cask, our two biggest sellers, they expect that big smoky, peaty slap in the face.
Right.
This one is much subtler in its taste experience. The smoke comes much later in the finish. You'll get it tomorrow about 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
I am getting it now.
Yeah, definitely for moving from the Bowmore range, Laphroaig, you're getting more of that smoke, the peat, but there's also a little bit of the sweetness, tempered by Laphroaig itself. It's not much. It's not as deep of those dark fruit notes that you're going to get with the Bowmore 25.
Right.
Some people gauge their smokiness on parts per million. Do you do it just subjectively by the blend, the taste, or do you factor that concept in?
The parts per million, the phenols, it's coming off. All of these whiskeys are coming off the still exactly the same way. At Bowmore, it's at 22 parts per million. At Laphroaig, it's 39 to 41 parts per million. But then it's time in the barrel, and what happens is the barrel, the wood, is going to layer. Time in the barrel or different more touches of wood, you're going to get less smoke, more the influence of the wood. So it's the phenols are there. They're just much more deeply layered below the more of the influences of the wood. So depending on the types of wood, it's going to pull out different flavors in the smoke.
And the age will tell.
And the age, yes, and you would think as you move along in this range here, the older it would get less smoky. Well, we do have an additional. We have a Laphroaig 30-year, which is in the low 50s in terms of its alcohol strength, but there's more smoke in that one compared to the smoke that we get in these in the 27 and the 28-year. So the barrels are very individual in terms of it's not always
even from bourbon barrel to bourbon barrel, you're going to get a variance in that smoke quality.
You can predict, but it won't always necessarily be completely accurate, depending on the location, the types of casks that you're using.
And then the blend on how much bourbon as opposed to how much sherry cask you're using will be how much finish of smoke you'll get.
Yeah.
And are the lower floors more optimal for longer term whiskey?
Yes. The lower you go, the closer to the sea. You're getting it's highlighting more of the spirit. The higher floors, further away from the sea, you're getting more influence of the wood.
Once again, guys, you are tuned into Essential Guide Talk. I'm here with Simon Brooking, and we are tasting some absolutely incredible offerings here from both Bowmore and Lafroaig. So we're going to continue on to our second Lafroaig offering here.
And we're cracking this bottle. This is a brand new bottling that is just coming into the market here. This is the Laphroaig 28-year. There is a younger variant of that is Laphroaig 27-year. Laphroaig 27-year, for you.
Thank you, sir.
Is aged in a combination of bourbon casks, hogsheads, and quarter casks.
Now, for the viewers, hogsheads are?
A hogshead is a slightly larger variant of a bourbon barrel. It's a 250 liters versus a 200-liter cask on a bourbon cask. And we find that the hogsheads, by using hogsheads, it'll give a little bit of a zing, a little bump to the whiskies as they're aging. So we like to call them hoggies. Are just that additional space in the casks brings some more flavors to the fore on this one. But this one is the 28, and this one is using for the last 2 years. It's going into sherry casks. There's a lovely the sherry for me really brings out more of that musty quality.
Right.
This one, this one certainly for me, I feel like it's a calmer day on the bay. As you're tasting the whiskeys, I think it's, for me, I don't like talking about tasting notes, but I do like talking about the dynamics of the taste experience. Compared to, say, maybe the younger styles of the Bowmores and certainly the Carchus that we'll be tasting later, those are, the seas are a little rougher by the distilleries on these days. As we move into the 25 and the 28 and 30 year, it's a much calmer day. And so, as a result, the flavors are kind of,
they reflect
the tides, the shoreline, it's lapping, and it's coming at you much slower. It gives you more time to reflect on those flavors. So
it's a great way to look at it.
Slanja, cheers.
Cheers.
That's beautiful. A lot of bourbon makers are switching to smaller barrels for a more rapid aging process. Do you find any difference other than the flavor taste profile on the hogshead versus other size barrels?
Well, I mentioned quarter casks, and the quarter cask for us are 125 liter casks. And we have a bottling called Lafroaig Quarter Cask, which has been our second biggest seller. And we decided to innovate through history by using those smaller barrels. And it was our master blender at the time, Robert Hicks, who decided to use those quarter casks. There's a lot more distilleries that are using them these days, and it's less about, I think people think that we're trying to speed up the process. I think it's more about creating a different taste experience. And one of the things that we find at Lafroaig is that quarter casks bring a real dryness to the whiskey, and that's a good thing. It's certainly that's one of the key flavors that John Campbell, our distillery manager, feels that are of the four key flavors for Laphroaig. Smoky peaty is one of them, which is kind of obvious, but dry is another part of the Laphroaig's flavor profile, and those quarter casks bring that dryness, more surface contact wood to whiskey, but also, to your point, the dynamics of the maturation creates a drier mouthfeel.
With a drier mouthfeel, I feel like it lasts longer on your palate. After you've drank it and you're just sitting there kind of smacking your lips, you get a little bit more of that complexity of flavor for a longer period. It
starts off, it kind of dissipates very quickly, but then it comes back. And it keeps coming on it. And that's a good thing.
Yes, it is. Especially when you're drinking things of this quality.
And for me, because we're moving to the 30-year next, you get more of the sweetness on the nose of the sherry with this, and then then it backs off and then goes to that dry and lovely long fruit finish on it.
So if you're interested in any of the bottles that you see here today, Van, do you have every one of these for sale here?
Yes, we do,
Except
for the 28, it's brand new.
Which is just being released.
Okay, so everything you see here today, you can come on into Bourbon, Scotch, and Beer, located in Lakewood, New Jersey. We're right on Route 9, the corner of Route 9 and what is it? County Line Road. So definitely come in here for Christmas gifts. If you want to bring a bottle to Thanksgiving, might be a nice thing to share. So come on in and say hello to Van.
All your holiday occasions.
Every holiday occasion, absolutely. So what are we at?
We're going up another 2 years here, but this is all bourbon casks. This is the Laphroaig 30-year.
This is probably going to be completely in my wheelhouse.
For you? Yes, sir. So yeah, this one's bottled at 53.5. So the 28 was bottled at 44.4. So the casks that we're pulling from in this one, we're spending a little bit. We're going to be more in the #1 warehouse versus the 28 is going to have spent a little bit of time up in the upper warehouses.
Right.
So getting a little bit more of the wood. Pulling a little bit more, losing a little bit more in terms of the alcohol strength, but this one is this is the one that I speak of that it really has held a lot of the smoke even after 30 years, but it's because of those bourbon casks.
Because you're exclusively bourbon casks.
This is all bourbon casks,
so
versus a little bit of sherry on the 28-year. Right. So here's the toast. We have to do a bourbon toast.
Yes.
So Freddie No is our good friend of mine, part of the Beam family, and this is one of his Kentucky toasts, and I've modified it to make it just a wee bit Scottish, so it goes like this. May there be no hell, and if there is, I'll see you at the bar.
Cheers. Incredibly smooth for 53 and change. You said 53 and a half,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, 53.5.
But every characteristic of bourbon, of the barrel, you're getting out of that little smokiness.
And just the personality of this versus the 28 are two very different personalities. And that's the beauty of all the whiskeys that are offered here. I mean, when people start to realize the variety that's out there from distillery to distillery, but also within each distillery, you become a kid in a sweet shop.
Right.
There's so many options, and can be a little bit more challenging given the price, but you know, it takes 30 years to make this, and we're talking an operational staff at Laphroaig of 17 people.
Is it really?
You know, people think big factories. These are old farms. You know,
True.
The two different distilleries operate slightly different. At Bowmore, 22 staff. They do everything. They do the maltings, they do the mashings, distilling. They work in the warehouse. At Lafroaig, we have 4 warehousemen. We have 4 malt men, and all they do is they grow the barley, they dry the barley, and then the other 10 are stillmen, mashmen.
You just think of big industry, you think of it being a much bigger organization.
Yeah, you ask the boys, they're always amazed that they see a bottle of this on a back
Making
bar
right.
around the world,
Right.
because these are global brands.
Sure they are.
But they are also handcrafted artisanal spirits, and in these artisanal times, with many distilleries, I think we are in a golden age of distilling right now.
I was just going to say that. I feel like it's come full circle.
Yeah.
You know, everything is based around history and what they used to do, and I feel like there's more of a respect being held to artisanal, handcrafted, smaller batch items than ever before.
A rising tide floats all boats, right?
Yeah.
So I think on the backs of these distilleries, there are so many in Scotland, around the world right now that are taking what we've learned and what we continue to learn from and then rise from there. And you're seeing a lot of great whiskey being produced all over the world today.
Really.
Simon, can you tell us this, maybe a little, maybe historical? We've got all these great old whiskeys, but the mid-range stuff seems to have gone away. The 15 we had, 18, which were delicious in their own right.
Right.
Are we maybe seeing things going forward? Will we continue to hopefully see, you know, products in this range age-wise?
Yeah. So the 15 and 18 year Lafroigs, to your point, have come and gone, and you'll see many of those types of bottlings within the industry. It's not necessarily as permanent as many consumers and retailers would like to be able to have, but to your point, we are making it as fast as we can, but you guys are selling it and drinking it faster than we can make it right now, so that's a big challenge for us. But we decided to produce a bottling called Lore, which uses a combination of 15 and 21 year whiskies. So as a result of that, we don't have enough liquid to be able to bottle our 15 and or our 18 year variant. With that said, we are also in currently considering a expansion at our distillery. Because of the demand,
Popularity.
you know, the island of Islay, as of today, there are 9 distilleries, the newest one being Ardnahoe, so there is a 10th distillery planning on going online. So it is a truly global brand.
How large is the island of Islay?
20 miles by 25 miles across.
So it's a small.
It's a tiny island. It's 3,200 people, and soon to be 10 distilleries within the next year. But we do listen to our customers. We do listen to the consumers, and certainly the 15 and the 18 year Laphroaigs were in great demand, and they are great whiskies. So we hope to be able to bring them back in the coming years. But as of right now, that liquid is in the Laphroaig Lore. So
there's your answer. If you're looking for 15 or 18 year, it's going to be in the Lore.
Correct.
So purchase the Lore.
Yeah.
Great.
So we have one more, and this is our Laphroaig Carchus. So, Carchus is a variant at Lafroaig that we have been producing since 2008 now. It's for the Islay Whiskey Festival. End of May, beginning of June, the island trebles in size. And every distillery participates, and we do special tours, special tastings, and special bottlings.
That's a bucket list thing for me. I must get there.
Well, one of the things, if you're considering coming over, it's a crazy party week.
Yeah.
If you want more attention, don't come during that week.
Don't come during.
If you want more personal attention, you can come around that time. My recommendation is you come the week after, because then all of the festival bottlings are available. Most of them are available for purchase.
See, that's a local telling you what to do. That makes sense. That's like going to Mardi Gras when you really want to go the week after Mardi Gras in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Because then you get to kind of enjoy all the residual.
But if you want to come off season, because during the summer it's there's a lot of people on the island, but May, June, you're talking about sun on the horizon still at 11 p.m. And then the sun coming up again around 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, so you get long drinking days. If you come in February, you get long drinking nights.
Right.
So, and of course, if you come then, if you can make it to the island, because a lot of times just the weather will hold you back, you'll be welcomed with open arms and a dram in one hand, because people have not seen anybody from off island in months, and they're very happy to see some new blood on the island. And so, but whenever you come to Islay, the hospitality, you are always welcomed, and I always recommend that you call ahead, make your plans ahead of time. You can get tours when you arrive if you just show up, but it's always best, because it's become as popular as it's become these days. It's always best to plan ahead.
But I know a guy, so I have a son, Liam Patrick, with red hair, so I think he'd be very accepted.
So in the spirit of Carchus, which means friendship in the Gaelic language, and this was a bottling that was named by our distillery manager's grandmother. John Campbell's grandmother named this one. So this is our 2018 bottling that's just arrived. This one is 6 years in bourbon and 2 years in a Fino sherry cask. Fino being the youngest of the sherry range. This is real bright, some nutty quality to it, some dry, but really a beautiful addition to the range. So.
Is Fino the driest versus Amontillado or Manzanilla?
Manzanilla specifically comes from San Luca de Barrameda, from that region. An Amontillado is a little bit older. The fortified wines, the sherries, the youngest, the Finos, when they put the wine in the cask, it sets up what's called a floor, which is a foam cap to the top. And if you allow that, and that's around 3 to 5 years, around 5 to 7 years, depending on the casks, some of that floor, some of that foam is taken away, and so now you start getting some interaction with wood, and that's an Amontillado. So it's a little bit older than a Fino. Okay. And then when all of that floor is gone, then you get an Oloroso. And I like to compare a Fino and an Amontillado is more like beer, and it's behaving more like beer in a barrel, whereas an Oloroso and a PX cask is behaving more like whiskey in a barrel, because there's more aeration, more interaction with the wood.
So guys, if you want to get a bottle signed, come here within the next hour. If you're anywhere in the local area and you'd like to purchase a bottle and have it signed, Simon will be here. He'll be signing bottles for you, but we are going to try this last. It's called Carchus?
Carchus, and here's the toast. Deep peace of the running waves to you, deep peace of the shining stars to you, deep peace of the singing earth to you, deep peace. Sláinte. Now,
it's a nice way to finish.
The thing that strikes me about this Carchus is that even though it's 8 years old, you would anticipate a younger Lafroaig to be big and smoky, sure. But that Fino really cuts the smoke and cuts the heat. At 51.8, this really that dryness, that nutty quality to it, that sweetness. This is a fantastic addition to the Carchus range, and I have to say that it's been received incredibly well for this. You'll know, please note that the Carchus will vary from year to year, so the color of the label, each bottling is a different type of maturation, so make sure that you are purchasing the one that you are interested, the year that you're looking at. The yellow, the light yellow label is our at 51.8. This is our 2018 bottling.
Yeah, it drinks like a much more mature whiskey.
Yeah,
for sure.
Do you look to do a different format on each vintage? You know, we have in stock currently, I think it was the Madeira cask.
And the cask strength quarter cask, which was last year's. John Campbell has got a number of casks in the warehouses that he is experimenting with. It's opportunity for him to put his stamp on the Lafroaig name. He tends to vary from year to year. This year is last year's was a little bit more traditional. The year's is a little more non-traditional. The Madeira 2 years ago was a little more non-traditional. So he tends to alternate between year to year.
Well, thank you. Once again, you guys are tuned in to Essential Guy Talk. We're here with Simon Brooking, and he is for Beam Suntory, but he is the brand ambassador for both Bowmore and Lafroaig. And we are here with Van. And Van is the owner of Bourbon, Scotch, and Beer in Lakewood, New Jersey. So come here for all of your whiskey needs, all of your beer needs, Scotch needs, whatever you need. Anything that you'd like to say, Van?
I'd just like to thank you both for coming. It was a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about your whiskeys and to try some great things.
So, Simon, I want to say thank you very much. This has been my pleasure, obviously, being able to try 8 of the best whiskeys I've ever tried. Anything that you would like to say?
I just want to thank both Van and UPJ for supporting our brands. We can't do it without your support.
Sure.
And to all of you out there, thank you for your support, and I hope you've learned a wee bit about our whiskeys today, and happy holidays. Slàinte.
So the prices are discounted because of this event today. So anything in the Bowmore or Lafroaig line that you would like to be interested in, go to the Bourbon Scotch Beer website, which again is in Lakewood, New Jersey. Can you tell them the website?
It's bourbonscotchandbeer.com.
AND. So bourbonscotchandbeer.com. Thank you once again, and this is Essential Guy Talk. I'll see you guys again soon. Take care.
Slàinte.